All right, so now I have to map this texture onto the geometry. Mapping is the process by which you tell the 3D software how you want to stick the decals on to those objects. We're going to get to these checkered icons up here in the shelf. These are going to help us to apply textures, to map them on. Cylindrical mapping, planar mapping, spherical mapping, automatic projection, and this icon you'll use a lot. This is your UV texture editor. This is going to open up a window that will show you the two-dimensional grid, and hopefully the texture that you've got will be previewed there. And it's going to show this in basically this UV layout. You're going to make changes here, and it'll cause changes in the 3D scene. So, for example, I right-click on this object and I can select the shell. The shell is the whole connected UV object. I can actually use my same Move tool hotkey and rotate and scale. And if I move that whole shell, you see what's happening in the 3D space? It's traveling around that map, moving it to different locations. And even when I get out here on the gray, I'm still seeing the map on the left. That's because the texture is by default going to repeat. Even if I don't see the repetition in my preview window, it is repeating on the geometry. I can actually set up this window to repeat the image as much as I want. This is the positive U and V coordinates over here. There's a negative U and V, just the way that you'd have a negative X and Y. So I can actually use multiple copies of this image to lay out my UV textures. So how do I remap those so that I can fit? Anybody know how I can force that easily to fit? You can scale it up, okay? That's one way, see? When I scale up, it's actually shrinking on the model here, so there's this sort of inverse relationship. When I scale it down, it grows on the model. And that is just because these UVs are covering a certain amount of two-dimensional space. If I'm having a hard time seeing this, I can actually dim the image this way, so now my highlighted regions will show up better because I've just turned the lights down on my image. So that may give me better visibility. Let's stay with that. But there's a cool function here inside your UV texture editor under polygons, unitize. One click on that, and what it tries to do is it'll take every square polygon that it can find and it'll force those squares to fit on this square of the texture. So all 6 of those squares are now right here, perfectly aligned over this square. Now this works really well for a block. It's not going to work well for every object that you're going to make, but for a block, that's a really great shortcut. It's just going to repeat the texture one to one. One polygon, one texture. Sometimes that's a good way to just reset, but other times it actually helps you texture an object like a cube. So now I have each square has one copy of the texture on it, going right to the edges, and it's actually pretty close to what I wanted. So there's a nice little shortcut. Let's look at it in object mode. We can even close our UV texture editor window, and I have a little block. But it's a block without any letters, and I wanted to get letters on it. So I'm going to kind of move that out of the way. In fact, actually, let me go back. And Command D, now I have 2 blocks. I'll move that one kind of out of the way, and I'll work on this one. I'm going to change this. This is already texture mapped, same materials, same UV mapping coordinates. It's all set up and ready to go. So if you're going to duplicate things and you want them to have the same textures, wait until you finish the textures and then duplicate it. Okay, so how do I get letters on there? Well, I can go back to my shader and find the new Lambert that I made. Block shader, that's what I called it. And I can open that shader here in the attributes. So you can see now that where I had color, the icon is different. So it's telling me it's already using a file there. I can still click on that to see where that file is. If I want to change it to a different file, that's where I go. And I'll click on this folder again and browse to a different file. So let's find CubeSide blank, that's the one we were using. Let's go to CubeSide 1 and open that instead. Now I have J's all over the block because what's happened is that I've swapped the blank texture with another one that has a letter on it. In the material is still there, the material is still assigned to that block. All I've done is put a different file in the material. And I can do that really with any file. I can just try that again. Let's see. Maybe I don't like the letter J. Let's see what other textures I've got. K, that's a good one. And B. All right, so maybe this is a B block. But since I'm changing the material itself, then both of these cubes that are using that material they're both going to change. So if I want to leave one way and change another one, what do I have to do? Well, let's go back to blank. What I'm going to need to do is leave this material alone, okay? Don't change the texture that's associated with that material, and create a new material. I'm just going to need multiple materials if I want each object to be different. So I can go back to this clone block and I can right click, assign a new material. So I'm just going to create a new material that's going to be assigned to this block. And I could do the same thing, Lambert, over here under color. I want to click that and select file. So now I'm going to go browse for a file, and it takes me back to my window by default. Now I can add the J texture, and you see I've got the blank one and I've got the J. They're different. Each block has its own material now. I can duplicate that, get it out of the way, assign a new material to this one, a new Lambert under the color, select File, and find the file that I want. Let's go to CubeSide 2. It's the letter K. I'm going to duplicate that, move that over, assign a new material, a new Lambert. So I'm making a lot of materials here, but that's okay. Maya can handle lots of materials. File, that's the one I want. Open that. And I've got a B block, a J block, and a K block, and a blank block. 4 blocks, 4 different materials, each using its own different texture. Now, but what if I want a block that has all 3 letters on the block, on different planes? Can I do that? Yes, I can. Let's duplicate the B block and move that out of the way. So I'm going to keep those blocks, but what I want to do now, I right-click to go to face mode. Now I can select a face and assign a material to each face. I've already got a material for each of these letters now, so I can just use existing materials. I don't have to create new ones if those materials are already in the scene and I want to use them. So let's go to the top face here, and maybe the bottom, so we'll put J's on both sides. So I'm going to right-click on that, assign existing material, and I'll find it from the list. I probably should have given them more descriptive names. Let's say Lambert 31. There's my J. Now let's put the K's on there. Got 2 of those faces selected, right-click, assign existing material, Lambert 32. Now I have a J, B, K. So I have a block with all 3 letters on it. Let's duplicate that once, not twice, and get it out of the way. Now what if I'm like, okay, but it's not perfect. I don't want that B upside down, or maybe I want to have 1 B up and 1 upside down. Maybe I'm just really perfectionist, right? That's okay. You're an artist. You should be kind of a perfectionist. So how do I turn those around? Well, I'll select the face that I want to reorient, and I'll open my UV editor window here. And when I have that face select, it'll be showing and highlighting those corresponding UVs over here. And then all I need to do is click one of these rotate buttons up here, these red circular buttons. I can rotate it clockwise or counterclockwise. Click it once for 45 degrees, click it twice for 90 degrees, 4 times to do it 180. So if you see over here, I've inverted the K. I could also use these buttons, so I could flip it horizontally, flip it vertically, and that's essentially a 180-degree rotation if you flip twice. I can rotate or flip the UVs that are associated with that plane. This seems really Mickey Mouse, but I'm teaching you really good fundamentals because you're going to use these again and again, these skills.